Welcome to another tutorial video by Lucky Fox Knits. Today I'm going to show you how to make a pom-pom, and what you'll need is some yarn. Today we're going to use the Drops Air Mix, and this is technically a light worsted weight yarn, but you can use any yarn to do this. You'll need some scissors, a sewing needle used for yarn, a pen, something to trace, maybe a measuring tape would be nice, and some paper or cardstock. Cardstock works really well, but I don't always have it on hand, so I just use whatever paper I have, and I have these little note cards. So I'll just stack them up to a thickness of about 3. And let's get going, let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find an object to trace to get my circle, and I'm going to do a larger circle and a smaller circle inside it, and you can use anything. You can use a paper cup, a jar of peanut butter, whatever you want to use. I like to use some of my sewing thread to get a nice circle. Often I'll just use my actual, it's a knitting tool that I have on hand constantly. It's my measuring tape. And so we'll just give that a nice little trace. And the circle does not have to be perfect. It can be close to perfect. Okay, and then something, you're going to need to trace something for the inner circle. I have another spool of thread here. Kind of try to center that. Alright, that's a little bit lopsided there. But that's okay, that'll work. So the most important thing is that the inner circle is no more than 1/3 of the size of the finished circle. So let's say I was making a much larger pom-pom. The circle could be larger for the larger pom-pom, but it has to be no bigger than 1/3. If for example I made the inner circle this big, it would be too big and the pom-pom would fail. It would not work. So we're gonna go with the smaller size here. I'll color it in so you can see where it is. Alright, so basically we have our circles ready to go, and now I'm going to cut the outer circle out just like this. And then I'm going to fold this in half and cut the center out. Like that. So now I have a couple of donuts here, okay? And you want to at least have 2 rings. So you kind of pile them together in a little stack them up like this. And here, I'll turn it over so you can kind of see what I'm working with here. And now it's time to start threading the yarn through your needle and filling up your little donut shapes here. But I want to tell you that you don't want to use the inside of your skein of yarn. So let's say you have your yarn like this. This is what's in the very center here. It's a little bit twisted and not very straight. It would need to be blocked in order to get straight. Now if you make a pom-pom out of kind of the guts of your yarn ball, it will be very difficult to trim it to be straight, because all of these fibers are going to point every which way, and it makes it pretty much impossible to make a perfectly straight pom-pom with the inside of a yarn ball, which is why I recommend that you use like a fresh spool of yarn, a fresh skein of yarn. And I have here my little yarn dispenser by Willisman Knits on Etsy, which I absolutely love to use to make these pom-poms. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to double the yarn up, and even more than double it up. I'm triple or quadruple it up, really. That just saves me a lot of time, because when you're working one strand at a time, you'll see that it takes a lot longer. So then I thread all of my yarn through the needle like this, and I start to wrap it around the little donut, the paper donuts that I made. And the yarn is pointing to the outer edge of the donut, and then I just go through the center like this. And I like to use the second loop to kind of hold those ends in place. And I'm just gonna go around in a nice little circle like this. And you can see the hole in the center of the donut is slowly filling up. So another thing I want to point out is that you kind of want to control your tension. You don't want to leave it too loose like this. You also don't want to make it super tight like that. You want the yarn to lay down kind of relaxed onto the paper or the cardstock, whatever you're using. All right, we're going to keep going. It's time for our second time around. Just going over all my previous loops there, just like that. Oops, looks like I'll just rethread that. And you want to fill it up pretty good. It's not quite full yet. There's still a little hole there. I'm just going to keep filling it. And looks like I'm ready to clip my loose ends. I'm going to clip them facing away, and I'm going to give them just a little bit of room to relax into the right size. If I had, because they were kind of being pulled tight, if I'd clipped them there, they would be too short. So like that, and I'm going to do that again. All right, let's at least double or triple up your yarn to save a bunch of time. Otherwise, these pom-poms take ages to make. All right, thread that. And you know, these are doubled up ends, so I just clip those free. And make sure the ends are pointing to the outside of the donut before you get going. Every time you add more yarn. I bet some of you are asking questions about pom-pom makers that you can buy in the store, pre-made, like it's a little plastic tool. And I found that those don't really make a satisfactory pom-pom. The pom-poms those make, in my opinion, are a little bit loose and a little bit sloppy, and I'm not a huge fan of those. I kind of like this old school method myself. See, that one's bent over. Okay. Almost there, getting there. I can feel that when I push the needle through the center, it's kind of going through a little bit more firmly, and that's what you want. You want it to be nice and full, but not overly full, not so full that it starts to tear the paper inside. Okay, that one's a little tight. Let me loosen that. All right, last one. Pull that through. Again, I'm loosening it so it's not overly tight, and I'm just going to clip my little fuzzies like that. So here we go. We've reached the next stage, and it's nice and full. You can kind of feel that it's kind of full. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide the fuzzies apart and divide the two donuts, and then I'm going to take my nice sharp scissors and cut all the fuzzies free. Like that. Okay, next step is I'm going to take a length of yarn and I'm going to slide it between the two donuts here, two paper donuts, and I'm going to do a double knot. So one on one knot complete, and here's my second knot, and you want to go slow because you don't want your yarn to break when you're tying the knot. This yarn, I know this yarn is pretty strong, but if you pull hard enough, it can still break, right? If your yarn is really fragile, like say you're making a pom-pom with Angora, just double it. Just double it up like this. If your yarn is super thick, you definitely don't want to double it. If you're making a pom-pom with chunky yarn, just use that single thickness. And one trick to making sure your yarn doesn't break is pulling on it close to the knot that you make. And that's because the yarn has it's what's called a staple length. It'll usually break at the same length of the animal's fur, wool that it was made out of. So if you grab it really close, it's much less likely to break. Okay, so now we have it tied in place, and we have these two tassels hanging off of it, and now we're just going to tear the paper donut off completely, like that, and we give it a good shake to fluff all the pom-poms out, all the little fuzzies out. Now, what's really important at this stage is that you muster up all the patience that you have, because what determines a good pom-pom is how much patience you put into trimming it. At this stage, it's never perfect, and it's never a perfect circle. It's kind of a peanut shape right now, actually. So I'm going to do some nice flat cuts to really shape it back into the circle shape that I really want. And I'm not gouging into it from the side. I'm just doing some nice flat shaping cuts like that. It's nice to have very sharp scissors for this job. I actually have my paper scissors here, and I have my fabric/knitting scissors here that I designate just for things that require really sharp scissors. So I'm just going around it, and now my cuts are getting much smaller, and I'm kind of looking at the horizon of the pom-pom, and I see, oh, that one kind of sticks out. Trim that one off and give it a good shake to see what sticks out, and trim those off. Now I'm going a lot slower. It's trimming up very nicely. Okay. Getting there. And one thing you can do is actually blow on it, and that shows you also which fuzzies still stick out. Now, one thing that I want to point out is I leave the bottom long. I don't make a whole globe shape, and that's a design choice because I kind of like when the pom-pom sits on the hat, it kind of sits like that, instead of up like this when it's round. You know, I kind of like a snug pom-pom with a wide base, and that's just a personal preference. So I leave the fuzzies on the bottom nice and long, and you just put as much patience as you have into trimming it to perfection. And when you're ready, you call it done. I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I go back into it. But one thing I want to point out is that you can always give it a retrim, even after a winter season. If you have a hat that has a messy pom-pom, go ahead and trim it up and make it look nice again. Because it's really simple and actually kind of enjoyable. I do enjoy trimming pom-poms to make them look really great and perfect. And that is how you make a pom-pom. And of course you would use these strands here to tie it, attach it to whatever garment or hat that you're making. And what I like to do is I like to trap a little fabric in here. So I would thread this one onto the hat and then thread this one, tie it on the inside of the hat, And then I thread both of the fuzzies through my needle like this, the long ends I mean, and I sew up through the top of the hat, and I just kind of go through the pom-pom itself like this, and I hide my loose ends inside the pom-pom itself like that. So it has a very discreet knot when it's attached to a hat, and you can't even tell. There's no loose ends at all when it's finished. And that's it for the tutorial today. See you guys next time.